Hey there, welcome to richardscorgi.com. Do you think M is for madness and P stands for professional mode on your camera? Think again. Cue the bumper. Hey there, so you have a camera and you've been shooting in P mode, like a lot of us do. Nothing wrong with that. But now you want to learn what M mode is. M mode is manual mode. 3 parameters to deal with in manual mode: your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. To demonstrate that, I use this handy dandy device called the Dslr controller. So ISO, that's the amount of light sensitivity for your sensor. So the higher the ISO, the more sensitive that sensor becomes to light. The adverse effect of a really high ISO setting is called digital noise. It's not super pleasant, so we try and avoid it. Sometimes you can't, and you're going to use a higher ISO settings. The nice thing is that modern cameras can withstand pretty decent high ISO settings and get away with it. Very usable. And then we've got aperture. That's the iris of the camera. It works like your eyeball does. When it's really bright, your iris closes down, and when it's dark, it opens up and allows more light in or less light in, conversely. Your camera iris, or f-stop, works the same way. The higher the number, the less light that gets into the camera. The lower the number, the bigger the iris, the more light gets into the camera. And finally, we have shutter speed. Slow shutter speeds allow you to do things like those beautiful trails on waterfalls, or the streaming lights and cars going by on a night highway. Those type of effects when you're doing 30-second or 4-second shots like that. And then high shutter speeds, of course, lets in less light, as the long shutter speed lets in more light. Stops fast action, right? You're out at a soccer game or baseball game and you want to get that motion frozen, you'll shoot at 4,000ths or 8,000ths of a second. So let's put some of this into practice. Using this, we'll go and play with ISO. So like I say, ISO will allow you to have more light sensitivity for your sensor. So right now I'm at 800 ISO, so let's see what happens. If I take it down to, without changing any other parameter, we're just going to change that light sensitivity. Now it's 400 ISO. Got a lot darker. We'll go down to 100 ISO. Got really dark. We'll go back to 800, and then we'll go to 1600. It's getting pretty bright. We'll go up to 6400, and now, wow, things are blowing out. Okay, things are blowing out. Let's say that is going to be that bright. What can we do to change that? Well, because I'm shooting video, I'm not going to change the shutter speed, but I could, just for this demonstration. So we're at 1/50th. So I'll go to 1/1000th. Wow, I changed a lot, right? Letting less light in is very much faster. Also, no motion blur, or not very much, compared to 1/50th. So we'll take that back to 1/50th. Oh, now we're just back to being blown out. So what else can we change? We can change the aperture. I know I'm at f4. Let's go to f11. Getting close, right? F11, F16 is a little darker, it's grainy. You can tell the grain's being caused by that ISO setting, right? But we're more or less back in the ballpark of where we started out. So we'll go the other way. We'll go to F4, and then we'll go back to 800 ISO, and everything will look okay. This time, let's change the depth of field. So we'll take it, this lens goes to 1.4, so we'll go 1.4, so now we've let in a lot of light, so the ISO at 800 is too high, too sensitive to light, there's too much, so we'll turn that down to, say, let's go down to 200, probably go down to 100. I'm not thinking about this too much, so yeah, there we go. Cleaner image, because the ISO is really low, and but more things in the background, not that there's a lot, but what there is should be more blurry, right? So we'll go the other way. We'll make it big depth of field. Whoa, picture's gone. ISO is too low. And f1.4. Okay, so here we are, f1.4, ISO 100, 150th because of its video. So I'm shooting at 23 point change. So you double that, it's roughly 50. Anyway, so here we go, 1.4, and you can see the octa box thing in the background is blurry, and the image is fairly grain-free and clear, and I'm in focus. So now we'll go to f16. Did you guess that was going to happen? Right, so what can we change? Go change the ISO all the way up to 6400, and it's still a little dark and a lot more grainy, as you can see. But just to emphasize that depth of field thing, you can see that the softbox now is in focus. So that's how that works, right? We've increased the sensitivity of light to the sensor and increased the depth of field, and so you get an image. It's a little dark, of course, still, and I don't think I can go any higher. So 6400 is enough, and it's already a horrible image. But that's how that manipulates. So we'll go back to f4 and watch your eyes, and ISO 800, and we're back. So that's it. Pretty simple, right? So your f-stop is going to manipulate the amount of focus depth, right? How much of the foreground, background is going to be in focus relative to the subject. And your ISO determines the sensitivity of your sensor to light, right? Higher ISO, more light sensitivity. Lower ISO, less light sensitivity. And then your shutter speed determines how much motion is going to be in the image, or how sharp or stopped, I guess I should say, the image will be, freezing the action. And that's it. You manipulate those parameters around just like we did with this little handy dandy device. So I hope that was useful. Love, like, and subscribe, the button thing. Tip.